Welcome back to What's New with Mead. I have a very exciting episode. This is episode 68, and we are with some of the family from Schramms Mead. Everyone watching or listening right now is going, oh my gosh, Schramms Mead is here, and you're right, I finally locked him down. Super excited to have Allison and James from the Schramm Meadery here to chat about Schramms Mead. So welcome, you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having us, Garrett. Like I just said, I've been looking forward to chatting with you guys for a long time. I think through many emails and things, I've wanted to get to chat with you guys. I mean, Schramms is such a popular mead brand, not only, but of course, everybody knows Ken and his book and all these other things. So I first want to start by, for people who might not know who you are, which I highly doubt that very many people do, talk about you guys. Talk about Schramms Mead, a little bit of the history. Give us a spiel.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. So Allison's our CEO and co-founder.
Sure. So Schramms Mead started officially in 2013. We opened in Ferndale, Michigan. My dad had written The Complete Mead Maker in 2001 and had done a few collaborations where he released his meads under the Bee Nectar brand in 2009 and 2011. But then we formally opened Schramms Mead in 2013. We had just a small tasting room. It was 1,800 square feet. There was a 20 seats up front, production in the middle, and a little bit of storage in the back. It was just tiny. And so we were making all of our meads out of there for the first 2 years. In 2015, we got our larger meadery just south of our tasting room on Livernois in Ferndale, and that's when we really ramped up production. We started making larger batches. We purchased just over 6 acres of orchard in 2018, and I think that's about it. A lot of people thought we closed because in 2020 our lease was up in the heat of the pandemic, and we had this tiny tasting room space that was never really a perfect fit for us. So when our lease was up and we had just everything was so unpredictable, people were being terrible to service employees. I just can't imagine having maintained that through the pandemic. So we switched fully to a curbside model. We closed our tasting room in 2020, and we focused a lot of our energy on our orchard and direct shipping, which we really ramped up because of the pandemic. So
have you noticed, having had a tasting room and now doing the curbside thing, have you noticed any change in, people who are discovering you, generally speaking?
So it's really nice when someone flies in from out of country or out of state and is able to just taste with you and taste with our team was really knowledgeable about all of the meads, the process of mead making, and we could really have that personal interaction. So I do miss a lot of that. But in terms of the switch to curbside, it's been much more efficient for us. It's been easier to staff. It's been easier to manage. We have only 2 curbside days, Friday and Saturday. Everything else is by appointment. So it's nice because in the summer, our team can shift up to the orchard. In the winter, we can gear up and do all the DTC shipping. And there isn't as much stress about staffing the tasting room in the middle of a blizzard in Michigan. So it has pros and cons, but I definitely miss talking to people, interacting.
Yeah. Well, and I asked that because I know that tasting rooms, it's a two-edged or double-sided sword in that, you get to show people all this mead and it's really exciting, but like you said, staffing and taking care of that, and it's its own little business that expensive, of course, too. So that's really interesting, and I'm sure it's still fun when you are getting to do curbside to talk to people. I'm sure there are people where you just hand it over and they drive away real fast, but it seems like the mead community and people who consume mead in general are more likely to want to talk. That's the kind of feeling I get from most community members.
For sure.
Yep. And, meeting new customers and acquiring new customers and trying to get our name out there is a little bit more hard than you would think. I think that the switch to entirely direct shipping model has kind of been harder on our retailers, harder on our wholesalers, because they're really doing the brunt work for us in terms of acquiring new customers. So a lot of our customers find us out on the shelf in Whole Foods or Plum Market or Total Wine, those types of places, and then they will have to make the leap to Google us, and that can be hard. So our online presence, I think the number one search term for that leads people to our website is Schramms Mead. So they're coming to us already with some sort of knowledge about who we are, and so it's something that we're trying to work on in the next couple of years is fix our website, do all that kind of stuff. So we've got the fundamentals down of fulfillment and shipping, and our team does an amazing job at that.
So you guys have obviously, like you said, you have an orchard. How has that been? Was it, this is a dumb question. It feels dumb, but how much of that was already prepared for you guys to start planting and to start, really using that, or is it from the ground up? You've had to set it all up.
Oh,
long shot.
It was a tree nursery before we bought it. So there was like a lot of irrigation that was already established, but I don't think we understood the scope and how much we would have to fully transition it. And the fact that like they were doing like more of a nursery operation and there was a lot of flowers.
Yeah.
And deer like love to eat fruit tree leaves. Like they are delicious. So one of the biggest, fastest things we realized was, oh my God, the deer are going to kill all of these trees if we don't protect them. And that has been probably our biggest hurdle, honestly, at the orchard.
Interesting.
James is great at doing irrigation. Like there are things that we are able to manage, but you can't manage deer. Like you can try, but because we're in it's not like farmland, so we're in a suburb and we can't put in certain things that you would be able to in like truly agricultural property. It's been a struggle.
I think it's one of two agricultural properties in the city of Rochester Hills, and it used to be relatively high volume operation, so they'd have trucks starting up at 6 a.m. And now it's just like dead quiet all day long, more or less. And so the deer have just been like, oh, this is our new spot to raise our babies. So we get a lot of baby deer every year, and it's
interesting.
We just keep coming back because it's the safe space in Rochester Hills.
Yeah. Well, and what are you guys growing, if you don't mind me asking? What are some of the main things you guys are?
We don't mind you asking. We're growing way too much is the answer. We have a spreadsheet. We are varietally obsessed people. I think I've said that before. And we are sort of collectors. So we have, I think 30 or 40 different kinds of things that we're growing at the orchard right now.
Wow.
Okay. But of course, we're trying to increase our Chardonnay cherry plantings. I think our greenhouse right now is pretty full of our grafted clones, basically. And they desperately need to move somewhere. But we're worried that the deer are just going to decimate them all. So we've come up with a plan, and we're going to slowly move them out of the greenhouse bit by bit because they can't stay there much longer.
Yeah.
But we're growing all kinds of raspberries. We're growing black currants. We're growing red currants, white currants, pink currants.
Whoa.
All these various things. Allison's got an amazing pollinator garden.
So like the number one focus is the Chardonnay cherries. And I'm sure that like the majority of your listeners already are really familiar with them from like Lambic Creek style beers or just from hearing about our meads. I know that at least one other meadery and a few other breweries have used them in the United States.
Ooh.
A lost cause is just got
Chardonnays?
Yeah. Well,
awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Awesome. Good for them.
They're
There's Goose Island.
They look different from ours. The Goose Island ones do too.
Yeah, they taste different. They look different. There's this huge debate in the Chardonnay community or whatever about what's a real Chardonnay and what's not.
Yeah.
And it's, it's not really so much terroir focused debate. It's really genetics debate, which is really interesting because they are clones.
So we say that because we had a lambic producer question ours. And we're like, no, these are real. So it's a really cool cherry variety. It's like so tart, so flavorful. It has dark skin, dark flesh, and dark juice, and that it makes amazing mead. But besides the Charbakes, we're growing Balaton, we're growing North Star, we're growing Carmine Jewel, Romeo, and Juliet, which are bush cherry varieties. We're growing Loganberries, Boysenberries, Hinamaki red gooseberries, John Keir Ventet red currants. They're like really specific varieties because one of the things that like we have for a long time been working on is figuring out, I mean, it sounds so silly, but because it's, I'm sure what everyone making mead is doing, but trying to make the best mead possible. We just are doing it now on a completely different scale where we have 6 acres of test fruits. And we continued, like the mead that we released last year with all of the fruits from this orchard, like you can look at the back label, it's called year 3. It's our 3rd year of fruit growing. And it's the best mead I think that we have ever made, outside of like just Charbake mead or just the Heart of Darkness. Like it's just so insanely well balanced. But it's like we're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what fruits play best with honey. What, like, I mean, estate honey is one of the cooler things we're doing. But yeah, the orchard, we have a lot of different fruit.
Well, that's so cool too, because you say you're 3 years of growing stuff. I'm sure you started very simple, and before then, obviously, you were probably having to purchase 99% of your fruit, if I'm guessing.
By volume,
more or less,
yeah. Because so we have my parents have half an acre, we have half an acre. We are not growing nearly enough fruit to support the consumption of Schramm's mead. And I have long been advocating for, and this might happen down the road, differentiating the 2 brands. You'll see this a lot in like winemakers, especially in the New World, who source their grapes and source juice. And they have a completely different brand for their wines that are made with estate grown product. And because a lot of the times we'll get the question like, why is one bottle $18 or $20 and the other one is $250? Or you aged it for years and now all of a sudden it's, a $400 bottle because you only have 6 left in the world. Like, so I think that it would be much easier to explain if it were 2 fully different brands. Like these are the meads that we make with fruit that we grow ourselves, that we're just, struggling, working so hard for.
Struggling. That is the perfect description.
Growing fruit is hard. Agriculture is hard. Farming is hard. And if you don't like realize how hard it is, just like overextend yourself in your garden one year and you'll be like, yep, that is insanely difficult. Like these people, you're sweaty, you're dirty, you're fighting nature. It's hot. It's just like agriculture.
You have to go do things that you don't want to do.
Agriculture waits for no one. The earth will take itself back from you if you let it. I don't know. Anyway,
that makes sense. Though.
There's a reason they cost so much more. But yeah, we source a lot of our fruit, and we're trying our best to use like local growers. We have local apples we buy, local cherries we buy, local red raspberries. I love to buy fruit from the Pacific Northwest. There's one like really nice old couple that still sells to me, brambles and things like that.
I already talked to Garrett about this. It's like one of the things. We don't have any secrets really. Where we buy the boysenberries is like the top secret that I think.
Hayberries.
Because we're only able to get like 800 pounds or 900 pounds this past year. And it was like half of what we got the year before.
Yeah.
And they're just so fantastic. They go right. We just make our Madeline mead with it, which is a boysenberry mead.
And a Smile of Fortune gets boysenberry.
And a Smile of Fortune, but not from that place. I almost said the name.
I'll steer us away from it.
I'm really bad. I'm really bad at keeping secrets, which is pretty much why we don't have any secrets.
I got you. I'll keep us away from that one. So that doesn't
just have to bleep it out if he says it. Okay.
I got you. Well, so it's like I've known Schramms for a long time. I've known you guys use a lot of fruit, and personally, I make a lot of mead, but I don't make the same kind of mead style that you guys do, and in that my fruit loads are generally way lower. So I can only imagine when you are trying to make I don't know what your general size for your batches are, but if you're making 200 gallons of something and you're having to throw in hundreds and hundreds of pounds of fruit, how you process those things. do you feel like you've had to continually buy equipment to upgrade to the next point where you're like, we're ready to go bigger? Is that part of the game too?
I wish. So we have all kinds of equipment. We started out with some tanks that were bought from Michigan Brewing Company when they went out of business, and they were milk tanks. And I think a couple of them are yeast brinks technically, but they're all open top. And the reason for that is because you have to get a ton of fruit. Like literally some of these recipes, it's a metric ton and a half of fruit. And so I would say our standard size tank that we have done most of our batches on is a 2,000 liter tank.
Yeah.
It's a variable capacity tank, which is a unique kind of tank.
I've seen those. Those are cool. They have the lid on top, right? And the rim is like a balloon, not kind of like a balloon. Inflatable.
Yeah, it's like a bicycle tire, more like a bicycle.
Those are cool.
And it goes all the way around. You could set it at any level inside the tank just by inflating the rim. And it's nice if you want to make 1,000 liters. I don't think we've ever done that in a 2,000 liter tank, but you can lower the lid and float the lid, they say, and then inflate the rim. It's useful for getting the fruit in the tank. Most of our primary tanks now, this wasn't the way when we started, but now, because of my insistence, I think, and our general lack of willingness to shovel tanks out the top, they all have a manway in the bottom. So you shovel them out from the bottom after the liquid's been removed.
Yeah.
So all of the fruit goes in the top. There's I think it's a 9-foot platform ladder. Is that 9 feet?
Wow.
It's tall.
Huge.
And then it's a 2-man operation. You hike the 40-pound boxes up to the top of the ladder. The fruit that
Maybe 9, because I can lift a box up top of it and I'm short.
So can't be 9. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the platform is lower down. I think they're
maybe the very top. I don't know.
But most of our fruit that we buy is either straight pack, which is like a solid brick, 40-pound brick of fruit, or what's called IQF, individually quick frozen. And if I'm mead-splaining to you, please stop me, because sometimes I say things to people like IQF, things like that, and they don't quite know.
Oh, you're good.
IQF fruit is really a fantastic way to get fruit. For example, I think the raspberries, they're frozen in the field. So they're picked really at the peak of ripeness is the idea, and then frozen as quickly as possible. IQF is really easier to manage because the fruits are sort of individual as they're going through the blast furnace or the blast freezing. I think I always say blast freezing. But they come out of the box and they don't slam to the bottom of the tank like a 40-pound brick.
That's pretty...
There's pros and cons.
Yeah. So whenever you are dealing with so much fruit and you like these variable tanks, obviously I'm looking at, a couple feet from me, I'm doing my first real dive into a wine where I'd bought 5 gallons of grape must that came with grapes. So I'm playing the game of pushing fruit down all the time.
Yeah.
Mm.
I've done it before, but never really to this extent. Does that variable volume tank, do you just push it all the way down and then, or do you have to?
You have to take it off. Honestly, so we have some larger tanks. There are some recipes that we do in our larger tank, our larger primary tank, where you can stand on top of the fruit. And I've never done it, but I have, I've put weights.
Wow.
So when the CO2 is going in the fermentation, it's bringing the fruit all to the top and forming like what they call a cap.
Yeah.
And the punch down or pigeage is a traditional red winemaking method that we use to, like you're finding out now with the grapes. Mm-hmm. But for like the blackcurrant mead in particular, you can stand on it. It is a real struggle. We've had a couple people on our team hurt themselves doing punch downs.
Oh, no.
In Babe. We call Babe. It's our 3,100 liter tank. It's I think our biggest primary tank that we have.
Wow.
But yeah, you have to do punch downs at least once a day, sometimes 2, for anywhere from 5 to 7 days.
Ken wants to do 9 now.
He wants to do 9 days. So, when you are doing that, when you're pushing the fruit back underneath the wine, or we don't do this, but it's called a pump over. You can pump the wine over the top as well.
Montage.
she's a grape wine person, so she knows all the French stuff.
I'm not a grape wine person. I mean, I'm just kidding. I am a grape wine person, and I'm not disagreeing with you on a podcast.
This is my wife. I love her to death. She disagrees with me every 35 seconds, so
I
it's
feel like
totally
you're
fine.
moving so much.
Yeah.
It's driving me crazy. It's not
So
very
when you can you
touch the table.
I
There's very
cannot,
it's to wet the cap is my I guess.
right. I can't. I'm not like able to conceptualize how you are pushing down so much fruit. Are you taking? I mean, are you like big spoon? Are we like you said? What are we
It's
doing?
basically a big spoon. Yeah.
Okay, so cap management really is, like you said, a French technique. Cap management. Remontage is a pump over. So basically you pump the wine from the bottom of the tank and you spray it out the hose to get the cap wet.
I don't think you can
There are
those, except for Schramms Mead.
No, that's not true. See, you're doing the thing. My dad and my husband do this thing now where they argue with me about wine things, but I love studying. I'm not like more of a grape wine person than anyone. I just like to learn about it. I've really had a lot of fun learning about these things. And whether or not we use some of these practices, like
remontage we don't do, but pigeage we do.
We have.
It's a huge stainless steel
It's
tool.
called a punch down tool. You can get it from a store such as GW Kent or other like wine making supply stores. More Wine probably has one in stock right now. And it's just got like a big handle on it at the top, like a T. And then there's a big circle at the bottom. And it has like a middle handle too. And you just literally, sometimes you have to put your whole body weight into it.
It's a 7-foot long potato masher with a T handle. And you really have to push it down like you're pumping one of those railroad.
I think we should start posting videos of this personally. Yeah. But it's really fun.
It's very fun.
We had an employee did get a hernia. That was
hernia.
That was not good.
Somebody hurt their shoulder. Really bad.
Yeah. My dad has been sore for sure after this too. Did you hurt your shoulder?
No. Okay. Not doing that. But it's hard, and it's the reason why people don't do it.
It sucks.
Most, small or boutique wineries that are doing this type of punch down, they're doing it in what's called a macro bin. So it's kind of at waist height, and they might go up a few steps and use the punch down tool, or they put a plank across the tank. And so they're actually on a piece of wood pushing downwards, and they have their whole weight of their body on it, but it's not super safe or sanitary.
There's also tanks that will like do it automatically. Yeah. We're not rich enough yet, believe it or not. Schramms Mead doesn't have a ton of money, but you can do these punch downs. They make these tanks that'll push the cap down for you, and it's call it auto vinify or something.
There's all kinds of technical tanks. Latina makes one that has a pneumatic cylinder on the top, and it does like a punch down, then it rotates.
They're really cool.
There are rotary fermenters that are like horizontal, and they may mix the fruit that way.
You guys will get there soon. That's I can see it in the future. That's awesome.
But it is, you can imagine it. Like if you're doing it in a 5-pound or a 5-gallon bucket, like you're saying, with a spoon. This is, you probably have seen videos of Ken Schramm doing this. He'll post them on his own Instagram page. You'll see him like whipping it with the spoon to get the fruit all stirred up. It's just like a much larger version of that exact process.
Yeah. There's this like American mentality where, you think if 7 days are enough on punch downs, 9 must be better, or 10 must be better. Let me do twice as many punch downs as Schramm's Mead. And it really is style dependent. It's fruit dependent. Mm-hmm. It's fermentation dependent. Mm. So sometimes you can get 5 days of punch downs done, and it's done. Like the point is to extract flavor and aroma and color from the fruit.
Right.
And the problem with these technical tanks that do the mixing for you is the what's the word I'm looking for?
Over extraction.
No, I know, but there's like you tend to want to over extract your wines when you end up with a system like that, because you're thinking, I used to punch down for 5 days. Let me do 10 days of automatic punch downs. And so some of the wines in rotary fermenters, for example, they have My brain is blanking right now. They have a bad reputation for being over extracted, and it's totally possible to under extract a wine in a rotary fermenter. It's just the guy pressing the buttons that's making the decisions. So Pidgeotch is a helpful sort of there's checks and balances in winemaking, at least when you're doing it like we are, where over extraction would mean that you did a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
No, you can also just leave the fruit on the mead too long and get astringency and overly tannic and over extracted and bitter and unpleasant.
I feel like a lot of people don't always consider over extraction. Most people probably think under, like, because it's like, well, if I just leave it on there, it's just going to get more fruit flavor. But you're right, there is that, especially fruit dependent. So on that note, I with you guys having your own fruit and you're designing these recipes, obviously most people who are higher level mead maker are looking at the sugars coming from the fruit and planning your recipes in that regard. So do you guys find, since you're 3 years in now, that you've had to adjust recipes quite a bit from year to year as the yield might be different? This is a more sugary berry this year, and or is there anything like that you've ever seen?
Not with our fruit. So with our fruit, we're on such a small scale that, like, I would say the vast majority of our fruit is picked by one person, and that's my sister, Sarah. And so she does do some testing, especially of things like the cherries. She'll test the sweetness and things like that. She has a really good, just like baseline knowledge of when certain fruits are ripe because we've been doing it for, since we were 6. So like we've been picking raspberries and having it get made into mead almost as long as my dad, almost as long as my dad's been making mead, we've been harvesting fruit for him. And so a lot of it is tested, but a lot of it is just like, experience.
Is the difference between what we're doing and what like a commercial fruit operation would do is like, we're going to hire 30 people. We're going to go pick the raspberries today.
Right.
What we do is we go through the raspberries or go through the currants or go through the cherries or whatever, and we pick the ones that are ripe. And then we go through again, and then we go through again.
Which is more,
and then we go through
that's
again.
really
and
common.
That's just crazy.
In places that are making like super sweet wines, because you're trying to pick at the peak of ripeness and you're trying to achieve a certain level of sugar. So most of our meads, all of our meads are sweet right now. All of our meads are sweet. I should just say that, not most of them. All of our meads are sweet right now. So if you look at somewhere like Sauternes or, the Mosel or somewhere that's like making ice wine, Canada, they're picking multiple times, especially if you're trying to get botrytis influence, like in the grapes, you're picking certain berries. And so that is closer to what we're doing, which is we're not just picking all the grapes and take the whole bunch off and drop the bunches into the basket and take them and make some wine. We are picking individual cherries as they ripen. Like sometimes my sister will take the nut off the tree, put the nut back on the tree. Our trees are netted because birds, like we're so small scale that every cherry matters.
Right.
Well, and when you're trying to get them to a certain sugar level, they just get increasingly tastier and tastier and tastier to the birds.
So she'll take the nut off the tree, and a lot of the times it's just based on color, we can tell, but she will test the sugar levels. And then, it might be 2 or 3 days worth of picking or more if it's, we're having some cooler temperatures and things are ripening more slowly.
But honestly, in terms of the sugar content from the fruit, most, and this is only a factor if you're using whole fruit, the water content of the fruit, generally speaking, by volume, will cancel out the sugar content. So most of our sugar content, I've heard people say this all the time, and it's just it would be a little bit of work to do the math, but the majority of the sugar content for all of our meats comes from the honey. The sugar content from the fruit is important. But really, when we're leaving fruit on to be at peak ripeness, we're not looking for just like sugar. We're looking for flavor and aroma and color, and those things are more important as the fruit ripens. That's
interesting. I haven't really thought about that. I'm also doing again, homebrew scale, so everything I'm saying is just way, way smaller than where you guys are at. But I'm doing like a no water blueberry, And so, you know, I've got like 16 pounds of blueberries and whatever pounds of honey and stuff. And it's been interesting to see, one, the amount of liquid that comes from that amount of blueberries. It's like kind of shocking to me, but it's just, I keep putting myself in you guys' shoes and imagining hundreds and hundreds of pounds of fruit and how you process that. And I think that's super cool. Yeah. Also,
promise me you'll come out when it's summertime.
Oh man, I would love to. I am visualizing these things, and I can't wait to hopefully see them in person. So when you guys are, obviously you're doing things on a larger scale and with probably some higher quality equipment, do you guys still go back to things, hydrometers, almost said Herculometer? It's a kind of hydrometer. I don't know if you guys have heard those. Or are you guys bricks? Like how are you measuring all of your sugar content at such a large scale?
So we have refractometers for everything. They're different scales, of course. So fruit refractometer rather, a honey refractometer, and then there's a wine refractometer. We do have a good collection of wine hydrometers that, they're like a consumable object at the meadery sometimes. They're just like shattering left and right.
That Herculometer, that's the one. I don't know if you've heard of it. If I had one, it's like a plastic. Shatter. It doesn't shatter. Oh. It's like a poly something, and it's accurate. I mean, you could toss it, and crush it, and you won't break it. So,
I also, it's kind of a sensitive subject, but I did spend a fair bit of money on my little Anton Parr density meter that connects to your phone and everything.
Those are expensive too.
I'm looking forward to having my distiller's permit shortly, and so that unit can also be used for distilled spirits. So that's primarily why I bought it, but it also does that stuff too.
I should have bought one of those when they were like $200, because the other day I was like, I want to get one, and then I looked at it and it was like $400 or something. I'm like, I can't justify that for my level of things, but I could see where it'd be useful for maybe a more commercial meadery.
Very accurate, and they only need like a very small amount. It's just about the same as a refractometer, honestly. But for spirits, they're particularly helpful because you just need a small amount and you can do it as you go. Yeah. As opposed to like with a Prufenthal, I think I'm pronouncing that right. There's a certain kind of hydrometer that you use for distilled spirits that you keep running. I think it's called a parrot. You put it in the parrot, but there's always a certain volume that you're measuring. So that's why I bought that thing. But we'll see how helpful it is for the rest of the operation. But
yeah. So talking about sugar content and things, I know you guys end up, like I said, making a lot more sweet meads at this point. Do you find that you are doing a lot more back sweetening, or are you generally starting and things are stopping sweet? I don't know what your process looks like, generally speaking.
So this is funny because I saw some people online debating back sweetening recently, saying like, if these commercial meaderies are telling you they're not back sweetening, they're lying. And I was like, okay, I can't remember the last time we back sweetened a mead. Really? Because we've been making them the same way so many times for so long. It's like, okay. And
it's hard to believe that that's the truth, because our meads are very sweet.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is something that a lot of meaderies aren't doing, but it's something that my dad especially has advocated for, which is making the best raspberry mead possible, making the best cherry mead possible. So maybe we've released a bunch of different SKUs in 1 year, but for the most part, it's either a varietal raspberry, a varietal cherry, a blend of cherries and raspberries, a blend of brambles, and it's all very similar recipes. So we're testing these recipes over and over and over and over and over again, where we're making maybe 3 batches of raspberry a year, but they're just different types of raspberries sourced from different locations, which gives different flavors. Different varieties have different flavor. And so it does taste different. But like, if you're making the same mead, essentially very similar recipe, very similar mead over and over and over again, you can get really good at it. And this is something that my dad has been saying so long, that we want to make this best mead possible. So we don't have to back sweeten because we know what's going to happen. We've done it. And sometimes there's an outlier. We have had a very few occasions where a mead either
cranberry.
cranberries are tricky, man.
Yeah, they are.
We've had meads that either don't ferment or ferment, like, just where did this come from? This mead took off, exploded, fermented to 16% ABV.
Right.
But it's so rare, and our recipes are so tried and true at this point that we don't have to back sweeten, because we start with a ton of honey. We use a ton of real fruit. We use a yeast that stops basically right where we want it to if we treat it the right way. And so fortunately, we haven't had to dump a lot of batches. We haven't had to do a lot of spoofing or
we have dumped batches. You have to be willing to dump a lot of mead if you only want to put out great mead. And so we have dumped some batches.
It's so heartbreaking too, though. Like, we have one batch right now in a tank
that needs to be dumped.
that I think needs to be dumped, and I just keep staring at it, and like, we don't need the tank space right now, or distilled or something. But like, we'll figure out. Yeah.
So when you're dumping these, are they generally because something has gone, like, you got a bad bug, you got bad bacteria in there, is that where you're generally finding these dumpings?
You've never had any sort of infection?
I don't want to curse that, but
no, I'm not going to wood for you. I got you.
So generally it's just because we don't like it and it doesn't taste good. And that sounds it sounds like we're coming from a place of like high luxury, but the only secret to making really great mead is make a bunch of mead and only sell the ones that are really great.
That's my philosophy when it comes to gardening. If you plant a lot of plants, you just cut down the dead ones.
Exactly.
But that's not my philosophy with mead, because that would be super expensive.
It is very expensive. I mean, you have to be good.
We don't do that a lot. Yeah.
We do a lot of piloting. We have a lot of pilot batches that never see the light of day.
Yes.
And if, for example, like when we came up with the Madeleine mead, we got 40 different kinds of fruit.
Yeah, that's an exaggeration. That is hyperbole.
Whatever. We got more than I remember. And then we just picked the one that we liked the best. And that became the mead that we named after Madeleine, who's our firstborn daughter. And that we have repeated that process many times when we want to come up with something new. Yeah. We'll do a survey of what we can get, what's available, what can we get for 5 gallons, and what can we get for 500 gallons. And so there's a product development process that is different in a commercial scale than on a homebrew scale. I wish I could do 25 different yeasts and 100 different kinds of fruit. But no, so we've never had any sort of bacterial issues. It's just always that we don't like it. And if we don't like it, we'll sell it.
Yeah. It's very rare.
The cranberry, was one that, fermented differently than what we had expected the first time we did it. And then we went from 5 gallons to like a much bigger batch, and it did the same thing. And we were like, oh, okay, this is interesting. The third time we did it, ended up doing something that we really liked. And we ended up releasing that, I think, on our first batch of cranberry. But
a lot of times, if we end up dumping a batch too, it's one that we like, it wasn't quite right for whatever reason. It was like a little too hot or a little bit like, usually it's that it was like,
even if the balance is off, like if it's too dry, like we did this one with a blackberry batch that was not small. But if it fermented too dry, and the balance was off slightly, a lot of mead makers would back sweeten it and sell it. Right. We ended up, I think, pitching some bacterial culture in it.
Oh, blackberry sac.
Yeah, and then
Enococcus eini.
Yeah, thank you. It's Enococcus eini, if anybody's interested. It's a malolactic bacteria that is normally in wood, new oak that's not been treated. And at the time, we didn't have any new oak. So we pitched a pure culture of this MLF bacteria, and we just left it alone for a few years. And that was actually one of our only dry meads that we ever made.
It was months. We rushed it. In hindsight, we've learned a lot since 2013.
I think it should have been anywhere from 2 to 5 years, and I think we did it in 6 or 8 months or something, and it was too soon.
Yeah.
But people love that mead, and we just haven't done it since.
That's like our only dry release.
We called it Blackberry Sec, which is dry. So yeah, people loved it. I don't know. We should really. We've always thought that we would have more space to do stuff like that, but our operation has filled the space that we're currently in surprisingly quickly. So,
well, I feel like, Allison, you talked about people are saying these things about commercial meads. I think I say we, because I sometimes look at like a commercial bottle, and then if it says 14%, and then I were to take a gravity reading of it and it says 1080, my brain goes, holy cow, like it must have back sweetened like as the final to get to that point. So I'm sure you have have better perspective on it, but that's my brain. That's where I go, holy cow, they must have started at like 1190, which is unheard of for me. Maybe it's a more achievable thing at a
we
level.
start higher than that. But here's the thing.
Our honey must is off the chart. If you're using the wine refractometer, you can't measure the musts on a wine refractometer. So if that gives you an idea of what our starting must gravity is like, and then we pump it over the fruit.
I will also say there's a fair amount of batch to batch variation. And within the United States, it's also important to kind of know the law. And a lot of the wine people are really aware of this, because wines coming in from France and Europe are taxed differently at different ABVs. And there's a certain tolerance of ABV that you can be within and be paying the taxes at a certain level, but also variance. So let's say a lot of our meads are labeled right now. We've switched from 14 was kind of our standard because most of our meads were 13.8 or whatever. Consistently, they were hitting that level. We've switched now to be closer to, depending on the mead, 12.5, because you have in the United States a variance of 1.5% either direction. So you can either print per the TTB that your wine is going to be between 12 and 15%. You can actually print a range. Most people don't do this. Or you can print the center point and know that below 14%, it's within 1.5% ABV either direction. Right. So if you're seeing something that's 14% printed, it could be as low as 12.5% ABV. Similarly, if you're seeing something that's 15% printed, it could be as high as 16% ABV. So if you're above 14% ABV, you only have a 1% variance either direction. So, if something says it's 11%, it could be that usually it's in that 11% range. Maybe this batch is 9.6, but you can still label it.
Huh. That's, well, that's the whole other level of mead making. As I've gotten to chat with a lot of mead makers, everyone has a story with the TTB, and everybody has these experiences of frustration and things. I hadn't heard that, so that's really interesting that you can put a range on there. Man, that's just interesting. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's one of those commercial things. Everybody assumes that it's right on the nose, but when you're making the same thing 30 times, it's not. There's going to be some natural variation. There are some mead makers whose variation is very, very small, and it's much easier when you're using syrups and concentrates and purees. In particular, if you buy a puree, it'll come with a certificate of analysis like you would with malt. It's not something that we have for honey. It's really not something that we have for fruit. Most people that are processing fruit on a larger scale will test the fruit and then either accept or reject whole lots of fruit. We have sort of just embraced the natural variation that we get from the fruit, the variation that we get from the process. Even the same mead might not be the same number of punch downs, for example. It'll almost always be the same amount of total contact time. I think we're generally around 30 days for most of our fruits. Sometimes it's less, but that's where you're going to really get the consistency of extraction of flavor and color and aroma and things like that.
So are you guys, because I know some meaderies and wine, especially, they will bottle with the intent to hold back and then sell. Do you guys find that you're selling stuff pretty immediately post-bottling, or are you setting back, other than, stuff like Heart of Darkness and things that are like those big vintages, I would say, are you putting back a lot of things or selling them pretty quick?
So that's an interesting question. When you say putting back, do you mean have not released at all? Like it's just something that you've bottled it and it's just sitting on a shelf.
Down to it.
I've heard some, maybe not a lot. Maybe the few people I heard it from, I'm putting that on a bunch of other people. But I have heard that within the wine world, some people do that where they'll, they have a 2018 that they bottled and they have been holding on to until 2024 when they're ready to start selling it. And so at that point, it's unreleased.
Oh, that's a really interesting question. And I love it.
Yeah.
And I think about it a lot.
It's multifaceted.
Because some wines that you're talking about that do that, it's the law. Like different wine regions. And this is something that I think that Mead is really missing is like any sort of actual legislation surrounding production practices, or at least even guidance in terms of quality and standards.
Yeah.
Nice.
But in winemaking regions, depending on the region, it'll say, okay, you have to do 18 months in wood in order to be labeled this. It has to be, 5 years on oak, depending. And here's all these different levels. And like in Spain, it's like, okay, it's been Crianza, Joven, Reserva, Gran Reserva. And in Italy, like in order to be labeled Barolo, it has to have a certain aging. And if it says this on it, as a consumer, you might not know, okay, this spent 5 years before, following the first May after harvest or like whatever the specific region is. And almost every like major region will have certain laws about when things can get released, at least within certain sub-appellations. And even if you don't know exactly what that is, you know what you're getting when you buy that bottle in terms of quality and level of deliciousness, I'm going to call it. Because like, let's say you wanted to buy, what is your favorite wine to drink?
I'll be honest, I'm not a huge wine drinker. I'm blanking on the name now. It's one that my wife really gets a lot that
What's your favorite mead?
It's a Rombauer is the brand. That's the one. It's somewhere here. So it's like I don't know. Anyways.
Well, have you made meads with grapes before?
I have done some. It's been very limited, and my only experience so far has been, it was like from a kit, wine kit converted into the mead, whatever. This is my first time doing it with real grapes. So
what is the grape variety that you use?
A Merlot. I'm actually doing a Merlot wine for the first time ever, and I'm gonna say it wrong. I think it's Sangiovese. I think that's how you say it. So I'm doing that as a Pyment.
Okay. Great. These are great examples because Chianti especially has tons of laws. But if you buy, for example, let's just go back to Barolo because I think it's an easy example. If you buy a bottle of Barolo, it's made with Nebbiolo grapes. If you buy a bottle of Chianti, it's made with Sangiovese grapes.
You know that. I don't know that.
If you don't know it, it's going to taste the same every time because it is the same grape. It's legally required to be the same grape.
Interesting.
And the same thing, like in the Loire Valley in Germany, if it's like labeled a Riesling, if it's in the United States and it's labeled Merlot, even there's, depending on where you get it from, if it's from Oregon, if it's from Washington, if it's from California, the law will dictate how much actual Merlot grapes have to be in there. And that's why a lot of these people will see like, okay, well, it says Cabernet Sauvignon or it says it's Pinot Noir. Like, for example, Pinot Noir. There's a lot of huge brands of Pinot Noir that are blending with like Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's a different color. It's a different flavor. There is there's no law in the United States dictating like, if you want to buy a mead, like there's these different mead phrases like Melomel, Metheglin, Sack, Acer.
Yeah.
Even the phrase mead doesn't have appropriate definition. Like most mead makers will commonly agree that a mead has 51% or more of its fermentable sugar from honey.
Right. Yeah.
But if you wanted to buy, say, a Melomel, there's no law that says it has to have this many pounds of fruit per bottle. And there are laws in other winemaking countries that say it has to be hand harvested. It has, like, if you buy certain bottles of wine, like even I think basic wines in certain areas, manual harvest is mandatory. Different things are mandatory.
Yeah.
And there's no protection right now for the consumer of mead to say, I am going to get something consistent. I know what to expect in terms of flavor. I know what to expect in terms of varietal honey or fruit usage, or there's no standards. So that's part of the reason.
Part of the reason Allison started the Mead Institute. My wife is really prolific at everything she does, but she's got to take it to 11 every time.
Anyway, does Schramm's Mead hold back bottles after bottling? and not release them? Not
Yeah.
usually. No.
Okay.
Very, very, very infrequently.
For what's called an ex-chateau release, yes.
No. Okay. So, but
For
before release,
practical reasons.
before it's released, we don't usually age. Usually, if it goes into a bottle, it's ready to release at Schramms Mead. Usually, our aging doesn't occur in the bottle. Usually, our aging occurs in the tank.
Right.
So, if we have a mead that needs time to age, it's going to age in the tank because it's a more controlled environment for the most part, and we're able to make, if necessary, any adjustments in the tank. If a mead is bottled and not released at Schramms Mead, it usually means that I don't like it, or like something happened where we're like, this isn't quite ready for release. Yeah. Or if we're waiting on labels, or if we need to wax it. And we're moving away from wax because I hate wax now.
I hate wax too. I agree.
For a lot of grape wines or any kinds of wines that see wood contact, there's also there are some practicalities around holding bottles that have been bottled.
Yeah.
Or even before bottling, taking the wine out of oak, for example, and putting it into a stainless steel tank for a period of time, whether that's years or who knows what. Tannin development, Elijah tannin in particular, can continue to develop after you take the mead or wine away from new oak. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think, I took it out of the oak, it's done. We're not going to get any more oak influence on this particular mead. But that's not true. There are some excellent books on wine chemistry that I recommend to everyone. And the tannin specific chapters, of which there are multiple, are really, really clear on that. And there's some excellent research that's been done about tannin development in wine. And tannins do continue to develop after you take the wine away from wood. And I would say even among winemakers, there are probably a majority of winemakers don't understand that yet. But in the traditional wine growing regions of the world, they do understand that. And they've created some of these laws and these standards around that type of thing so that you don't, when you buy a Merlot or you buy a Pinot Noir or Sangiovese, you're not getting something that is like really weird. And it could taste very strange to you if you're used to a standard.
Is that as a customer, like if you buy a bottle, a certain bottle, and it's labeled a certain way, you know what you're going to get. You don't have that in mead. Traditional orange blossom mead could be who knows what. There's no labeling commonality.
Even among orange blossom honey, like even if you take it just back to the honey, orange blossom honey could be lime honey, it could be lemon honey,
grapefruit,
it could be any citrus, and they just call it orange blossom, and that's the law. So like it's kind of some really weird stuff going on in the mead industry in terms of standards, and we're hoping to try to address some of that just for the consumer's sake.
Right.
But also we do hold back meads after they've been released to do like holiday releases, sets that are specials, like and also we have some customers that buy mead and hold on to it and age it. Like when we first opened, I think my dad recommended we put these age statements that are like, it'll be best in 5 to 10 years. And that really confused people early on. Like the concept of holding it like, oh, it's not good now. And I think our mead customers, for the most part, have come to understand what that means. But mead drinkers weren't coming from a world of drinking wine. They were coming from a world of drinking beer. And my dad was putting these like wine terms on there, like hold it for 5 to 10 years, or this will reach peak maturity in, so, however many years. And a lot of that has to do with what kind of cork you're using, what kind of mead you have. I know, I see our child's awake.
I know. We might have another podcast guest here.
But it's nice to be able to release from our personal library, from our business collection, like 5 years worth of a specific mead, so that people can, if they are just getting into mead right now, they can buy the 2024 and they can buy the 2016 maybe even, and say, okay, so this is how mead ages. Maybe I really prefer it with age on it, so I am going to buy the current vintage while it's more affordable, and then I'm going to lay down 6 bottles and I'm going to drink those, at my birthday in 2030. Like, it gives you that opportunity, if you have access to library meads or older meads, to say, I prefer it with some age on it. And that's why we hold back some.
Well, and it's also less common with wineries and meaderies that are producing products that are not intended for aging. If you're using sorbate, then your mead's gonna taste an awful lot like geraniums in 8 months. And so there are some meads that are just not destined for aging, and that's okay. It's, as Charlie Bamforth says, it's horses for courses. You're going to have, for this really straight course, you're going to have a specific kind of horse, and for a track that's going in circles, you're going to have a different kind of horse. But our meads are pretty much exclusively designed for aging. They're always released on what's called a drink hold status, which means they're very drinkable now, but there is aging potential. I think we've only ever released one mead on a hold status, which was Blackheart.
Yeah.
Black raspberry. There's a lot of little seeds. I don't think it was over extracted, but it just, like, even if you have 15 days of contact with black raspberries, you're going to get quite a lot of tannin.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might want to let that mellow out over a few years.
Right.
Like a Barolo.
Like a lot of these grape wine varieties that do the same thing, and for which there are standards that say, here's how you should age it.
Well, I feel like you never hear the words mead collector. You always hear wine collector, like everybody, or, you have any variation of that where people are just collecting that kind of stuff. I've never heard of somebody who's just collecting bottles of mead. Well, then I'm sure they do. That's the thing. Maybe my bubble, I'm living in this little bubble. So I'm sure if I open up, look out a little bit, I'll see it. But I think that people do, generally speaking, buy mead to drink it within X amount of time. At least the average consumer.
All wine consumers. We use a cork that's rated for 20 years. And the reality is 85% of all wine consumers will purchase and drink the wine within 3 days. Mm-hmm. And so having this cork that's capable of doing this long-term aging, and having a product that's designed for long-term aging, and a packaging that's designed for long-term aging, and a process on our end which allows that to happen once the bottle has been transported off our premises, is really something that we're passionate about. It's a thing in wine in a lot of products, but more so in wine these days. It's extended producer responsibility. And we really take it to heart, because if somebody buys a bottle of our product and if they do what we tell them to do, they should be able to enjoy it in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And if something's wrong with that, if they do everything right, then it's our responsibility to fix it. Mm-hmm. So in wine and in food, that's kind of a weird concept, but extended producer responsibility is something that we take pretty seriously. We stand by our product, and if somebody has a bad experience, we replace the bottles.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Most people aren't meat collectors, and most people do drink meat within the first week after buying it.
Well, but on that note, I think a lot of commercial meaderies are not producing mead with the intent to age that long sometimes. Some people are, but I think the general intent is, shorter time. So it's kind of cool that you guys have some of these long-term ones that you're suggesting people age. I haven't really seen that on a bottle before. That's kind of fun. It's a new thing that I think will help the mead generation grow some. All right, I would love for you to plug some stuff about the Mead Institute if you're interested in doing that. I know I got to chat with you guys. Oh my gosh, has it been a year? How long has it been? A long time ago. It feels like we talked about the Mead Institute, and I know you guys have been through some changes or growth, whatever you want to call it. What's going on with that?
So the Mead Institute we founded with the goal of establishing quality standards and an educational body for mead. Right now, if you're looking to take courses on mead, it's very difficult. There's not mead schools like there are brewing schools and wine schools and enology, viticulture. So we wanted to kind of establish a knowledge base and also a general consensus of certain terminology. Mm-hmm. And we've been working on that. It's a group of people that was founded by myself, Frank Goldbeck from Golden Coast Mead, Ken Schramm. You may know him. And then Carvin Wilson, Pete Backlick, and originally we also had Chrissy Mannion-Zerpour, who wrote The Art of Mead Tasting and Food Pairing, I think I always get that backwards, but mead and food pairing. And originally we made a bunch of different documents. So we made a tasting grid just to be able to start the process of uniform language around mead, acidity, tannin, things that you would be able to evaluate in wine or in beer haven't been established in mead. So even if I'm sorry that I didn't know enough, but are you a beer drinker?
I am a beer drinker, yes.
Okay. The Cicerone program and the BJCP program, BJCP really, have written the style guidelines for beer. I know that they've written the style guidelines for mead, but they established this uniform language where it's like, here's what the color has to be, here's how the flavor is going to be. And the mead industry, I think, has really struggled to embrace those and to take it to a commercial level, or even an international level where everyone is on the same page. So the Mead Institute has been working really hard to come up with common language. And so we have the tasting grid and we have a language chart. Then we hosted the US Mead Open, which was an interesting adventure. I think we'll be hosting another one ahead of Mead Day in 2024.
Okay.
This is Lily.
Aww. Cute.
Yeah, the Mead Institute is definitely going through a growth phase right now, and you will see some exciting things coming out in the next 12 months.
Well, it's interesting. You guys are on an uphill battle because, to me, I feel like mead has been I've watched it be such a big sandbox for people who don't really want to be boxed into guidelines, and so it's finding the balance of like, hey, let's get some guidelines. But then also, like, you can still be free, play in your sandbox, but stay in the sandbox. And I don't know. I think that the mead community is definitely the type that it's a little bit against having to live in that, which is interesting.
My thoughts on that are basically, if you're declaring what's in the product and you're being honest with people, then I think they can make their own decisions. Yeah. But all too often in the wine industry, internationally, in mead industry nowadays, there are people that aren't being honest about what's in the bottle. And I'm sure if you've ever judged a competition before, you don't have a freaking clue what's in the product. Sorry.
Right.
And there are some people that are dropping out of being judges in these competitions because of the weird stuff that people are putting in the bottle, and they're calling it mead. It's very strange, some of this stuff.
The mead industry can choose to be cowboys forever.
Yeah,
I think that is something that could very seriously happen, where people will say, I don't care, I'm going to do whatever I want. But I've seen a lot of those meaderies go out of business. They're kind of falling like dominoes across the board, these small producers that don't want to band together, that don't want to advocate for the entire industry. And I don't think that mead is going to be a viable industry if there is no common language. Like, I'm not asking for anything insane. I don't think, like, in terms of commitment here, it's just like common language, being able to talk about your product, having an understanding of what your product is, knowing there's nothing wrong with defining quality. Like, I use this analogy, like, I love, sometimes you get off a shift and you just want like a 10-piece chicken nuggets. Like, that's okay. It's okay to love a chicken nugget. It's okay to eat chicken nuggets. It's okay to eat Dunkin' Donuts. Is it the same as a French croissant that's been made by hand with like flaky layers of organic grass-fed butter? No, it's not the same. It's not the same as like organic free-range chicken.
Right.
You can define quality and acknowledge that one is harder to make, more expensive, totally different. Does it like taste better? Yeah, probably. But sometimes like a chicken nugget and a donut is just what you want and just what you need. There's room for that. And that's like analogy and need that I think is worth thinking about. Like, it's okay to make the donut, but you can't say it's an artisanal French croissant because that's dishonest.
Well, and
it doesn't taste like it. Like, you can taste the difference.
We've tried to introduce the I don't know what you would call it, but there's something called QPR, quality to price ratio. And you can use this in every aspect of your life, not just in wine and mead. But, we have another local meadery in Ferndale, Bee Nectar. I think that they have the same QPR as us because their price is lower. The style is different. I enjoy it. I enjoy a lot of their stuff. Some of the stuff I don't, particularly the stuff with cloves. I'm not a huge fan of cloves, but it doesn't mean that they did it wrong.
Right.
I think their QPR is pretty darn high because I enjoy it, and the price is not huge.
Yeah.
And so, just like Charlie said, it's horses for courses. I think that the only challenge is introducing some, like you said, and I've said this before as well. The people, at least in the commercial mead industry, and definitely in the home mead making community, it's the Wild West. Everyone's doing their own thing. They do tend to come to mead making from a background which is different from beer and wine. You need less money to make a meadery than you do to make a brewery
or vineyard.
And for wine, you don't need access to somebody growing grapes, or you don't need a vineyard. So the capital requirements are much lower. And people start making it in their basement and they think, I'm going to make a commercial mead and I'm just going to take that same mentality to my business. And it just doesn't work. The Brewers Association introduced this, I think it's trademarked craft beer logo.
Yeah.
And you have to follow their guidelines in order to use that logo. And I think it's brilliant. And one of the guidelines that really upset people is, and you'll understand maybe in 2024, maybe this is not a big deal, but when it was introduced, the Brewers Association said, don't be sexist, don't be racist on your labels. And this
people
really
were like, wait,
no! A lot of people.
Yeah, that's silly.
We're freaking out. Like, I'm going to use your logo and I'm going to be racist. And you're not going to be able to stop me. Well, like it was more with the sexism stuff. The Brewers Association, I think, it was a master stroke with this logo. But they're using this logo in order to sort of enforce some basic guidelines for quality. What is a quality beer? A quality beer is not one where you have a sexist label. And I think that's one of the things that we sort of copied for the Mead Institute is that mead, if it has a sexist or degrading label, it is not quality. And it doesn't matter if it's made with hand harvested cloud fruits. If it is if it has some sort of label which is demeaning to women or demeaning to a certain race of people, it is not a quality beverage. And even to this day, just saying that, I know that I'm going to get some comments from people saying, well, that's not right. We should be able to do whatever we want. And if if customers buy it, then so be it. But we have to draw a line in the sand somewhere with some of these labels and some of these types of products and say, these products are not, this ingredient's not acceptable for a quality beverage. This type of label's not acceptable for a quality beverage, that kind of thing. So it's something we're trying to do. And it's hard.
Well, trying to
female CEO.
I live obviously in the world of, I see a lot of green mead makers who get very confused by different styles and stuff like that. So I do love that you guys are starting to really kind of funnel down into a greater idea of what mead is. And hopefully, maybe 5-10 years from now, as people are really starting to embrace these new things, we'll see a change in the mead making sphere, because it'll be interesting to see it grow. But right now it feels like it's going through the same world that the craft beer went through when it first exploded, which was everybody's making their own thing in the Wild West style, like we just said. So it's cool to see that, because then I'm like, oh, I've never tried this thing in a million years, but I'm going to try it. But then there's also the fact that it's like, you can't necessarily find normal stuff all the time at this point.
It's graham crackers. Like this is cool. Let me try this. Someone crushed up graham crackers and put them in their beer or mead. Cool. That's totally fine. You can do that. No one is saying you can't make this kind of mead, but we have to be able to say.
I really so Bee Nectar makes a graham cracker apple pie that I love.
Yeah, their meads are good. I like Bee Nectar a lot.
Yeah.
I love Mead Nectar. I love Mead Nectar. We have a basement full of Mead
You don't
Nectar.
have to keep saying it.
We are Mead Collectors.
Yeah, we're collectors.
Well, I hope I didn't offend earlier when I said that. My goal is not to offend.
I don't know.
I haven't heard many people who are holding a bunch of different bottles. So other than my own homebrew, I mean, I hold a lot of my own homebrew. But anytime I get commercial stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna drink this. So.
All right, I'll be sure to send you twice as many bottles as you think you need.
Hey, I'm excited to hopefully summertime be able to come out and see you guys. Maybe I can, if you guys are still up for me doing that, we'll talk as we get closer. But I'd love to see all of the vineyard and the operation. I feel like, again, I have the drawings in my head of what it looks like, and so it'll be fun to see it in person.
We'd love to have you.
You guys are obviously paving the way, kind of pioneering the next generation of mead, and I'm super curious to see not only what you come up with as Schramms Meadery and the flavor combos and the meads and everything that comes out of that, but then also Mead Institute. I know, again, Allison is, at the top of this very difficult subject for us, and so I'm in full support of whatever you guys do. But is there any way we can? Obviously, you guys ship. Are you through Vino Shipper? Are you guys through your own source? How does it work?
So in 2019, I started doing our shipping in earnest. We were only shipping, I think, within Michigan. Sorry, I don't want to put it right in front of the microphone. We are shipping to a number of states. We have our own program. So the Vino Shipper is really popular for meaderies. They handle a lot of the compliance stuff, and they make it easy. Over the years, I feel like they've gotten much better than when I started in 2019. But we have our own homebrew. But I built the shipping compliance program from scratch, using the same software and tools that Vino Shipper is using for these other brands.
Cool.
We do direct shipping ourselves. The fulfillment is in-house. Like most of the wineries that are on Vino Shipper, I think people don't realize that Vino Shipper is just kind of like handling the order processing and compliance stuff.
Some compliance. They don't have to.
Yeah, it's complicated. We could probably do a whole nother podcast on DTC shipping.
We haven't done podcasts in so long. Thank you for letting us be on here. We're dusting the rust off. I hope people don't think that we're too snooty.
We're probably rambling too much.
Sorry for rambling. Yeah, especially when we're together. People are not going to like us.
So it's store.schrammsmead.com, or you can just go to schrammsmead.com. I think that's redirecting to the store these days.
Schrammsmead.com.
But we do all of our own fulfillment, all of our own compliance. And honestly, I've said this to everybody in the meat industry who will, stomach me talking for more than 5 minutes. I absolutely think that Vino Shipper is worth it. It's a good platform, but doing it yourself, doing it from scratch, handling all the compliance aspects yourself definitely has benefits. It's probably more expensive, especially nowadays. Vino Shipper has changed their rates, so it's much more competitive, but doing your own compliance program from scratch is definitely worth it. It's another one of these aspects that you really don't have to worry about when you're a home mead maker and you're just shipping meat all across the country to competitions and stuff. You don't really have to worry about that. But there are all kinds of aspects to shipping alcohol to people that you have to think about.
I definitely I have not had to worry about that yet, and so maybe there's a day, who knows, but I'll enjoy home mead making at this point. But I'm going to put all of these things down below. I'll put all the links I can find for Schramm's, as well as the Mead Institute. But thank you guys for spending some time. I know you guys, obviously, you have your hands full, literally, with things to do today, but I appreciate you spending time and talking about the meadery, and I really do look forward to see what you guys come up with in not only Mead Institute, but also Schramm's and everything to come. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
If you want to support them, hit those links. And other than that, I'm sure we will. My hope is to get you guys back on again in the future. Maybe we'll make this a every once in a while we get to chat about what's going on, what's new. Maybe we'll do a live one when we're up at. I get to see you guys in person. That'd be kind of fun. So.
Anything you want to know, we're an open book. I'd like to say there's nothing proprietary at Schramm's Mead. So,
You hear that? Go ask him all your questions. There you go. He just gave you the green light. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much. Cheers.